Brenda Wells is on Zoom, and she's representing the I-5 Freedom Project. Brenda, hello and welcome to our meeting. Can you tell us about your project?
Oh, you're muted.
There you go.
First box on Zoom bingo, you're on mute. I represent an organization, a nonprofit here in San Clemente. We started about coming up on our 7th year, called the I-5 Freedom Network, because sadly there's more than one kind of traffic on the I-5. And we are a education and advocacy organization intending to mobilize communities on taking informed action. We started out by wanting to engage hotels, equipping them with the right tools, because a lot of labor and sex trafficking happens in that industry. And having had experience, working as in the hotel industry, I felt like I knew that area, and so that's where we started. We now do work with survivors of trafficking, where we provide them access to personal and professional development workshops, so that they can, get back on their feet, get reconnected with some opportunities, and then just feel, prepared to go out into the world. We just finished an example of our community awareness, where we brought some experts together to talk about how safety around human trafficking and the Super Bowl are tied together. Captain Bedfield joined me there, and one of our speakers was a survivor of trafficking who is now confident and comfortable enough to come in and tell her story and use that experience to teach us what to do. And so those are the things that we do as an organization. We, training and advocacy. We also, start with the city level. This project and what we do can't be done without the support of law enforcement and the city level businesses and council members and opportunities. It's a big problem. And I think there's all these spokes of the wheel that need to be engaged in order for us to really get the momentum we need to make a difference. And so that's our approach. We had a resolution when we very, very first started this in 2015. My first order of business, if you will, was to talk to City Council back then, and we got a resolution passed that was signed by the City of San Clemente, agreeing to acknowledge that human trafficking is a problem, and the city would agree to do things to help, make an impact wherever possible. Another thing we did, we were working with the City of San Clemente, is we helped craft ordinances to address the illicit massage industry that does exist, not just in San Clemente, but throughout America. Because that is at least in California, it's a municipally run issue, so every city gets to decide who gets a license, and so we can create a system where it's harder to get a license if you want to, if you have the intent to do, criminal activity, and it's also easier to shut it down through code compliance and ordinances rather than, any kind of, criminal investigation. So those are some of the ways that we have approached the problem and, working well with the city. So I'll just pause if you have a question. So if you have a question, just interrupt me. But in terms of, this is Anti-Human Trafficking Awareness Month nationwide. January every year is Awareness Month, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, just to give you some high-level understanding of how it might show up in our own community. So we talked a little bit about the hotels. When I very first learned about this problem before I started my own nonprofit, I went to a anti-trafficking awareness event that was hosted at the City Council chambers there. And they brought in the the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force DA, and he identified Patriots Hotel on El Camino Real as the place he knew to be a problem. Like, I can walk there. I mean, that was so close to home that it changed the way I wanted to do something. It definitely accelerated my desire to do something about this problem. And that's, he had some indicators, and so that was our goal. How do we turn hotels in our town into a mobilized, ready industry so that we're not just, unprepared. And we have had incidents of that. One of the first hotels we trained was the Volare. It was the Holiday Inn, and we trained them. And within a week, I would say within 48 hours of them having this awareness, they now were identifying indicators. Obviously being trained wasn't, caused the problem. It just now alerted them to the problem. It was there all along. They just didn't know what it was. We also did the training of Holiday Inn Express, and we brought Department of Homeland Security and this lead sergeant from the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force at the time, and we were doing a training in Spanish for the housekeepers and the maintenance people, because that's where the crime happens. They're going to see these things. At that moment, as we're walking in there, this sergeant, supervisor of the task force said, "Oh yeah, we've been here. We've conducted operations here." The general manager had no idea that this hotel was in the crosshairs of the anti-trafficking task force back then. So we know what happens here. So, so those are some things we need to think about when it comes to illicit massage. If you are going there looking for, solicitation, I know that if you go in there and you're trying to, undercover cops are looking for, you're planting bait, hoping they're going to get a hit. They may or may not be successful, but it becomes really hard to do something about it. You can ask Captain Benfield how hard it is to get the victims to testify, how hard it is to get, to track the owners, because it's a shell game of ownership and things like that. It's a lot easier to get them on code compliance, and we know that they're breaking the rules when, they're open after 9. We know they're breaking the rules when, you can't see in the window. Those are all kinds of things that are easy to do. In Dana Point, there is a massage establishment that's right next door to where I have gotten my hair done a few times. And I asked my hairdresser about it. She says, "Oh yeah." She only shows up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Is usually there till 1 or so in the morning. She is on call. So these are actions of, and the primary business customer is male. Those are all indicators. So that's how close it is to home. And so we really would just like to have our city leaders, our business leaders and representatives to be aware that this problem is happening here. This isn't somebody else's problem. This is very much an our problem. I'll just take a pause and see if you have any questions.
I've got a question. Does that icon up there mean that Chris Duncan is monitoring this meeting? Is that what that means?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
He's participating remotely.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, this will tie in with him. I know you had a workshop, I think, earlier today in Dana Point. Is that correct, on human trafficking?
Yeah, we just had that today, and we ended up going virtual because coronavirus was making a challenge for a lot of people, and it just felt safer. So we just had that.
Okay. I assume that you had these workshops in other cities, and my first question is, and this kind of ties to the second question, are there other cities that are doing things better or more efficiently in this area than we are? I know we're just starting this, but is there something we could be doing better that you've learned from other cities to make this process quicker, to be more efficient in addressing this issue?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and the answer will always be yes. No city is going to be 100% effective unless they really, have some superpowers. But the more we do, the better. Just some examples of cities who are being proactive. Laguna Niguel, Mayor, they frequently have anti-trafficking awareness events in their city. San Juan Capistrano, their council member got these ordinances passed, and they proactively pursued places they knew to be problematic. So again, we have great ordinances in San Clemente. I mean, they're effective, but they need to be applied. And so you can make things better by identifying, mobilizing the community to say, there's strategies that we can take on how to do that, and we can definitely talk about that. So that's another thing. As a hotel chamber of commerce type thing, what can a city do to compel their hotels to be responsible here. In 2020, starting January 2020, it's now a law that all hotels have to train their staff on how to identify and report human trafficking. That bill is SB 970. There's some fine print in there, like who has to do it, who doesn't have to do it. But could a city say, we want to make sure our city is prepared. We're going to do something to encourage, incentivize, require, I'm not sure what your rights are or what's within your capacity, to make sure at least all hotels and motels in San Clemente are doing their part. Obviously addressing the illicit massage, making sure our schools, campaign to have our schools train their teachers and their counselors on how to identify and report, along with, encouraging additional curriculum. Because another law that was recently passed in 2020, all these great laws passed and then the world shut down and then they kind of been forgotten. So it's time to start, readdressing, implementing some of these things. But it's now required for students. I think it's fifth, 7th, and 9th grade, or 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, something like that. They have to get, training, not training, education, prevention, peer advocacy, like awareness, kind of like self-empowerment type stuff, as a mode of prevention. So, but what can we do to make that stronger? How can we make our schools more ready? We can take the minimum effective dose, but we could check a bigger box. Because honestly, the training for the hotels, all that's required is 20 minutes of online readiness training. Now, I used to be on the Human Affairs Committee, and I had that required. I had my sexual harassment training and my ethics training. We all have to go through it. We can all imagine how effective, government-funded, mandated compliance training is. It's not as engaging as it could be if we don't believe we need to be caring about it in the first place. So what can we do to up the ante? How can we bring better, effective tools to the industry to be ready?
Is that a rhetorical statement, or
are you asking us?
Are you going to give us the answers?
Well, so what we could do is, just to answer you, if we can require the training, the first thing we need to do is make sure our hotels are compliant with the law. Have you had your training? That's a law. Now, is it effective? Because we did a survey of hotels who were willing to talk to us. Of the hotels that we trained, only 65% had been trained. 35% didn't even know there was a law. So that's the first part. I was really surprised. That number was actually higher because most of the time people don't know about the law, but they are. So 65% of the hotels that we reached out to knew about the law and were trained. 35% had no idea and obviously were not trained. Of the 65% who had been trained, 100% of them said they had done nothing different. They had not made a single report, not changed a single policy, not done a single thing in sort of staff readiness to take that training and turn it into readiness. So after training, implementation training is what we recommend. And that's something that we provide or we can consult with and do all kinds of things to support.
Great. Brenda, I had a question. Sounds like right now you're talking about the sexual exploitation type thing. What about the labor trafficking?
Actually, when it comes to hotels, labor and sex trafficking is a reality in that industry, so that would cover both. Labor trafficking is definitely a place we can also address, and that would show up in a lot of our service industries. Just for some statistics and some awareness, when it comes to the sex trafficking presence in the U.S. and in Orange County and here, the majority, and I'm going to say 85-ish% was the most recent statistic, 85% of sex trafficking victims are U.S. nationals. So they're being trafficked, they're being recruited, and they're Americans. In short, the majority of sex trafficking victims are Americans. When it comes to labor trafficking, that number switches, but there's also a misconception there. The majority of labor trafficking victims in the U.S. come here with a legal visa. They come here with the right to do so. They're recruited from another country under false pretenses, and then they get here and through circumstances of force, fraud, or coercion are ending up in a place that they can't get out of. It is, in certain terms, modern day slavery, where in sex trafficking, more often than not, the shackles, if you will, is fear and psychological and manipulation. When it comes to labor trafficking, although those also exist, it's also very much a physical control as well, like in terms of like their movements are controlled, they're contained in space differently than sex trafficking.
Okay, just to go a little deeper in the labor end of it.
I'm sorry you cut out a little bit there, I didn't hear your question.
In going a little deeper in the labor trafficking, what about domestic labor trafficking?
So domestic in terms of like domestic services or like Americans being trafficked?
Like people taking these individuals home with them, and they are basically slaves at their home.
Yes, yeah. So again, those are typically going to be foreign nationals who have been brought here under false pretenses, and that's probably one of the top 5 labor trafficking industries. Domestic services is definitely one of them. Whether they're being brought in as like a child slave. There's a really famous story happened here in Irvine, I say within the last decade. It kind of started a lot of our actions. Shayi Mahal is the person's name, and she was a young Egyptian girl who was actually sold by her parents to another Egyptian family, and then she was then brought here, lived in a gated community, a really wealthy family in a gated community in Irvine, had no idea. The community had no idea what was going on. It took the keen eyes of a neighbor who said they have 4 kids and there's one other kid that's not like the others. They finally did something about it, and they were able to do literally a jailbreak, and then that story happened. So domestic service is definitely one of the top venues for labor trafficking. Agricultural work, again, most of the people who come here to work come here with a legal right to do so. You don't want to confuse labor trafficking with smuggling or illegal immigration. Those are very different realities. So we also have construction is a big, and restaurant and other restaurant work, and then beauty services are also places where a lot of labor trafficking happens. So like nails and hair and massage, all those kinds of places.
Can I circle back just for a second on this requirement for hotels to educate? Who enforces that? Does Orange County Sheriff do anything about finding out if hotels are complying?
Not to my knowledge, I don't think that's
So
they pursue.
I'm just, it's too bad that Adam's in New Orleans. Well, it's not too bad that he's in New Orleans, lucky him, but we could, maybe at the next meeting, we could chat with him to see if maybe code enforcement has any hand in that whatsoever. Because I mean, it's good to have a regulation, but if absolutely nobody enforces it, then
It's not a regulation.
it's not a regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll look into that before our next meeting and see if we can get some clarity on that.
Yeah. Look, when you read the law, so I'll just go ahead and put the bottom line up front, if you will. When it comes to the fine print of that law, the first thing is that in order for it to be required, you have to have, I think, 50 employees or more. So that right there eliminates just about every hotel in San Clemente. Ironically, those are the hotels where the majority of trafficking is happening. So they cut off the requirements for the training for the properties that really need it, typically. Now you can look at it like, so for example, I know the Volare, I don't know, they may or may not be at 50 employees, probably not right now during COVID. But the thing is, that hotel is a franchise hotel that is owned by another, same family that owns a couple other hotels. Now, maybe does that person, they have 50 employees, does it mean by one property? It's not defined clearly. So you might be able to think about it like that. The other thing is if there is no, what do you want to say? the strongly worded language is that if a hotel is found not to be in compliance, then they may be required to do so. I mean, there's no like agency that's responsible. So this is where I think as a city, we have an opportunity to sort of create a code. Again, I don't know what the enforceability or what the rights are, but that would be really intriguing if you could set the model that way.
Well, hopefully that's my thought, maybe at least pursuing that, and it's nice that Chris is here listening to this, because I know he's a big proponent of this, and being on the city council, maybe if we could push it from here, maybe he could help facilitate it from there, so that's good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Brenda, how would you put into words what you would like the city council to do to combat this problem you just talked about with hotels?
So if I heard you correctly, what would I like to see city council do?
Yeah, what kind of words would you use to describe what action you need out of the city council?
Well, they're getting started. We're having Councilmember Chris Duncan being here and starting getting educated. When we first started this, the first thing that needed to happen is they needed to believe me that this was a problem. And so they believe me that this is a problem, there's not a lot they can do, but I'm glad we have advocates like Chris Duncan and even, Councilmember James. He's also been pretty committed to awareness of this problem. Once we've achieved that goal, then we can start doing things proactively, like, all right, so we have these ordinances on the book for the illicit massage. Let's start creating a strategy to address them. What can we do to make it harder for trafficking to take hold and thrive here? It's really just like an awareness and a decision. It takes really one champion to start seeing the places it could show up in the community and then address it systematically like that. That's what happened in San Juan Capistrano. It's what happened in San Clemente. When Gene, it took me 3 years of actively trying to get the city of San Clemente to agree to sign these ordinances addressing massage establishments on the books. It took one councilman to say, let's make it happen, and that's what happened. And I don't know that anybody didn't care. I just don't think anybody thought it was a big enough problem to worry about. Well, we have at any given time at least 8 establishments in San Clemente who have been reviewed for sexual activity. And that's as good as an indicator.
Okay, so it sounds like public awareness is a big piece of this. The public doesn't understand what's going on. It's not a problem. But if you present it, I don't know, we use the press or press releases or whatever, but basically I was unaware of this stuff. So, it's being brought to our attention. We got to bring it to the attention of the public.
Yeah. So I think you nailed it. We can't do something we don't know anything about.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And an analogy I like to use is that human trafficking for most people is it's like a dripping faucet. You don't notice the sound until somebody picks it out. So somebody points it out, and all of a sudden you can't get that sound of the dripping faucet out of your head, and now we want to do something about it. So if we can just, alert people to the dripping faucet, and it's a nuisance, it's uncomfortable, we don't want it, we want to fix it. That begins with education and informed action. We want to make sure that when people start learning about this, they're listening to the right sources, they're taking the right action, that there's a lot of misinformation out there that we need to make sure that we're finding credible sources, because there's nothing more dangerous than a motivated, misinformed activist, taking a gun to a place where they think there's children there and being wrong about that. So we want to make sure that we have credible resources. So the education, so beginning with the training and being fluent in the cause, at least as much as you possibly can in the beginning, and then taking that message out to our community.
If the code enforcement, if the city does do that and enforces these laws and with fines or whatever for the hotels, what do you suggest the city do with the victims that are being exploited by these hotels? Finding the hotel is only half the problem. What do you recommend for that?
So depending on where you're going, I would do something similar but slightly different. So if it's a massage establishment, those victims are most likely going to be a foreign national. And in the San Clemente Ordinances, it's written right in there, but you have to know it, that if you are successful in some level of one kind or another of closure, like shutting it down because of violations, that should trigger a call to I don't know if the sheriffs have a translator service or not. Do they, Captain Denfield?
Yeah, we have a few.
Yeah. So what would happen is going in with awareness, recognizing those people in there are not criminals, they're victims. Take the victim-centered approach, and before you shut them down, and they're very real, they become walking out of the building, that you have an option for them to choose victim services, or they're gonna, or go in the van with whoever they came to pick them up. So it should trigger a call to victim services, and they're gonna be afraid because they're probably gonna be in violation of their documents because that's the setup that their traffickers put them in. So if we're not careful, they'll be treated as a criminal and illegal immigrant rather than a victim of trafficking. So that's the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the resources available to help them in that particular context, if it's a foreign national victim. If it's a U.S. victim, you have to be prepared emotionally for their resistance and their reluctance. But again, when you deal, we just had our last conversation with the Sheriff's Vice Department, and those 4 investigators have this figured out. And so you would reach out to them, and they have probably a protocol of victim advocacy and resources available, getting them the right place and giving them the options. We want to look at it not like a rescue operation, but recovery and options for resources.
Hey, Brenda, thank you very much, and thanks for the presentation right before this too. I've got to jump on another Zoom, but a couple things. So one of the things, and I'm not sure if I let you know or if somebody did, but Gene and I are on a subcommittee now for the trafficking, formal subcommittee in the council, and another subcommittee for Gene and I. But so I would like to have our public safety committee work with you to produce tangible steps, kind of like that question we had. So what are the things we can really tangibly do, action items to set things in motion, right? And then it's up to us to broaden public awareness through other or continuing measures, but like for really hard and fast steps to take. Come back to us on the subcommittee with that, and we can bring it to the council. So we want to make a difference here. Yeah, we want to do something that is that we can see results on, and not just nibble around the edges. So that would be what I'm looking for. Thank you, everybody over there, except for Rick. I'm just kidding. For engaging on this, and yeah, looking for the insight that you all can provide with all of your experience and Brenda's insight and expertise on this, so that we can, change the narrative a little bit and have a nice article written in the same way about all the good works we're doing in this area.
And we don't have to wait for there to be a problem to do something about it. I mean,
Sure.
Just because we can't find it doesn't mean we shouldn't be preventative. I'm not convinced we won't find it, but that doesn't mean, we will. I just want to, prevention is a lot less painful and a lot less expensive, than the opposite, so.
Sure. No, I love being proactive. So I'll let you all continue. Thank you, Tony, for being there and being part of this as well. And let's get something done, and I'll keep the discussion going. All right, take care.
All right, thanks, Chris. Nice to see you. Okay.
Thank you. So to carry on with what the councilman said, what kind of action items would you like to be, that you, from your perspective, we can help you with to help this whole process?
Can I just jump in real quick here? I actually asked for this to be put on the work plan, and I remember the overwhelming support I got. And I'm the only one I'm the one person subcommittee on the human trafficking component. So if it would be okay, and if somebody wants to join me now on this, it'll be completely fine. But we should get together as a subcommittee and get together with Brenda and sit down and hammer this out and kind of have a strategy. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that'd probably be better than in a meeting like this, because the brainstorming thing takes a while too, but we've got to address it.
And again, anybody who want to jump in on that subcommittee with me, I mean, you can. Okay. Anyway, well, Brenda, you and I will be in touch, and we'll kind of work out a little some bullet points of what you think, and then I'll bring it back to this committee.
And just to kind of broadly put some broad brushstrokes on there, I think, definitely one thing the city can do is to host a community awareness campaign, or an event. Again, Laguna Niguel has done this a couple different times where, they've had this big press release, they bring in speakers, they have conversations about it. Now, the funny thing is, when it comes to Laguna Niguel, they have, I think, a massage establishment ordinances that were written about the turn of the century. They got 4. And, because they don't have a problem yet, they haven't had to respond to it. And I think, sadly, in a lot of situations, rules and policies are written in reaction of a problem, not anticipation of a problem. So thinking about, what can we do now? So I think a public awareness campaign of sorts would be really helpful. And that would be external and mobilize the community. And then what can you do as a safety committee? What influence and what opportunities do you have to affect policies? How can you enforce state level laws at the city level? How can you create a city level ordinance that can be enforced within your community? Those are some things that we can look at.
Great. Super.
All right. And then I'll be happy to sit down with you as in person. It'll be a lot more fun, and start hammering out some opportunities and some really creative, innovative ways that will set San Clemente apart.
Got it. Any other questions for Brenda?
I guess, Brenda, my wife and her friends are very concerned about this kind of an issue. But the men that I know and everything, we really aren't that concerned. I mean, is that your experience, that women are more involved in this sort of thing than the male component?
With the cause itself?
Well, just understanding the issue and why it's important to do something about it. What can we do?
I would say, men are definitely underrepresented in the fight. Whether it's because they're not aware or they're fighting other fights, I don't know. But I have found that men are underrepresented, and I don't know what the reason for that is. I think one theory is that a lot of when it comes to trafficking, we all default to like the sex trafficking thing, and that might be an uncomfortable place for men to get involved, or maybe it's a much more passionate place for women to get involved. I can't say for sure, but it's true. And we also just to go there, just statistically, so again, broadly, when it comes to labor and sex trafficking, it's about a 50-50 problem. It's about a 50-50 problem, labor trafficking and sex trafficking. It's just that we only can identify one more easily than the other. When it comes to sex trafficking, male versus female, conservatively, they think there's about 30% of the victims are males. But we all think that they're women. So we get what we look for. We find what we look for. So if we're not looking, we're not going to find it. So that's, just kind of, and so maybe for those reasons, it's not a men that's appealing to fight, or a fight that's appealing to men, but we would love to start seeing more of that.
Great answer. Thank you, Brenda.
Pardon?
Great answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right, I'll let you have your meeting back. Thank you for letting me swoop in here.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, my contact information. We'll set something up in the next month or so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you on Sunday, Chuck.
Okay. Maybe.
Well, here we are. Anyway, it's a good presentation, a good introduction into this human trafficking thing.
You're going to need help, Rick.
Yes.
It's clear.
Oh, are you offering?
This is a big.
Are you offering to help?
Are you pulling me in? Is that what
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
Okay, put it on the minutes that Mr. Hightower has been put on to the Human Trafficking Subcommittee.
We have minutes.
Oh, I
from
think they're the
last
same,
time.
but I'm
I've
not
got
sure.
that one, but I need this one.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, because we're going to be reviewing the minutes of the November
Oh, this is-
23rd
okay.
meeting. Has everybody got a copy of that? Yeah, let me have one of those. Chuck, let me have one of those.
Yeah, you got it.
At least one. Also want to, for the minutes, note that Captain Malat is present. Thank you.
Sorry for being late.
No,
You didn't miss anything.
yeah, we just started. Okay. Ready to review the minutes from the November 23rd. A lot of information here. Okay.
Did we talk about that flock safety issue at the last meeting? The traffic camera, or the
Well,
car readers?
We were looking
That up?
for a status, and I think we've got one. So we'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay, okay.
Everybody browse them a little better.
Anybody care to make a motion?
I move that we accept the meetings of the Public Safety Committee that occurred on November 23rd, 2021.
Okay, second.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Hands up. Good. Okay, good. All right. Rebecca, any oral or written communications?
We have not received any oral or written communications.
Got it. Okay. So we're into reviews and recommendations of OC Fire Authority's Q1 performance measures. And if you look at your agenda, it has that information on there. What we're trying to do is to see if these measures are appropriate. Give us enough information to understand what's going on, and if it's not, if there's more information that needs to be on here from your perspective, we'll consider that.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, we can discuss it, and this is, so these are the standards that we've been using probably for 8 to 10 years, have been measuring the same thing. It's not only emergency response, but as well as our fire prevention, our inspections and plans checks, and the length of time that we have our turnaround, the 5 minutes and 10 minutes, depending on the complexity of our plan. So if you compare the numbers from year to year, we have not seen any trends. We have not seen, and from quarter to quarter, we see a fairly consistent, over the past few years, a fairly consistent time frame that we've been looking at. I think some of the things that I want to point out in this one is our annual fire inspections have been significantly affected by COVID. So our annual fire inspections include those inspections that engine companies go out and make. During COVID, last year we put those on hold so that our fire crews, as we try to keep them from getting COVID and keep them in service, we had delayed our inspections last year, hoping that the numbers would go down. We have reinstituted our fire engine, or our company level engine inspections. They were supposed to be delivered out in January for this year. What we do is it's an annual inspection load. Station 60 has a tremendous number of annual inspections because the number of fourplexes. It's a state mandate for fourplexes to be inspected annually. Those were all printed. They're actually sitting in my office to go out in January, and then our spike hit. And at the time that we're struggling to make sure that we have fire engine staff, we put another delay on our company level inspection. So you'll see that number will go up significantly Right now, we have delayed it through March, so we're still hoping to get through this year's annual inspections with it to start again in March. So that number will go up significantly. Our plans checks and construction, all of those numbers have stayed about the same. Our fire prevention staff has stayed in person, stayed fully staffed, and our turnarounds have not seen any delays, as you can look with the percentages down below. When you look at our response time, efficiency, the average response time of calls. So there's two ways of measuring, and there's a fractile, and then there's the average. So if you look at that average response time, we take the number of calls we had, we take the on-scene time, and we literally divide it and find that average. So when you look at our response times, although it's under evaluation right now, but our board approved back in 2002, I want to say. So we have our response times that we shoot for is 7 minutes, 20 seconds for the first unit on scene. That is 1 minute for our dispatch time, 60 to 80 seconds for our turnout time, and a 5-minute drive time. Where we run into our challenges here in San Clemente is the geography, and the number of fire stations we have will always be a bit of a challenge. If you look at our average times, it's still 7 minutes and 20 seconds. We actually hold ourselves, we like to use that fractile, although it's not as, they typically don't look as good. So the fractile, what you do is you take the call, if you make it in 7:20, and then what number of times do you make it in 7:20 or less? So right now, if you have somebody dials 911 and they're in your front parking lot, and your on-scene time is 30 seconds, that really helps your average. But a fractal, it counts as one call, right? So you look at that. So if that's why you see the big difference between percent of calls within 7 minutes as 60% versus that average looks pretty good. So it really depends on the way you look at it. Once again, the biggest leading cause for that fractile being lower is the number of fire stations and the number of units we have. It also shows, as we go through some of the other things that have been coming up, the importance of having 3 paramedic units in the city, being able to respond from the 3 stations that we have. But remember, there was a time when we were supposed to have a 4th station, and that was well before my time, but it was decided that we could probably do with 3. But when you look at that drive time of 5 minutes or less, think of everywhere in the city that you try to get within 5 minutes. As an example, there was one time when I was starting to drive, from truck 59, just for them to get to the freeway is, what was it? Well over a minute just to get to the freeway. Station 50, although it's right on the freeway, it takes a long time for them to actually get to the on-ramp and onto the freeway. So those are the things that make it difficult, let alone when you start going up to the top of the hills in this city. It can be a challenge. So the biggest thing I think I want to point out is that these numbers, in my 4 years as your division chief, these numbers haven't changed. They haven't improved, but they haven't decreased. And the other part of that hasn't changed is our number of fire stations, and really that big thing is that 5-minute drive time. That's our biggest challenge here in the city.
It's amazing that we're using standards from 20 years ago and you're still maintaining them, because the traffic's gotten worse in the last 20 years. I mean, so the fact that you've been able to maintain that time is phenomenal. I mean, just the traffic in the city in the past 20 years has gotten so, because that's about when they were starting to build Talega. And that's incredible. I think that's really impressive.
Yeah. And some of the other, and I know, Chuck, that you've looked into maybe expanding some of these. When you look at NFPA standards and guidelines, and you look at we have a template of what our response guidelines are. And if you want to expand these and get into that effective fire force, which is 17 firefighters on scene for fire, you can start looking at truck responses. And you'll see that truck responses in San Clemente are a challenge just because of the geography. So we can expand some of that, and I know that we've spoken briefly on it. You've had a desire to start looking and truly comparing that to our standards of coverage, the national standards of coverage, which line up, and truly what you have here in San Clemente. And then as you go through it, you'll really see that some of the fixes, it's not an easy fix. The one good thing is that as we continue to see buildup around the city of San Clemente, which is only at one side of it, it's the north end. But the third quarter of this year, we'll be opening up Station 67. So that's another paramedic engine there on Cow Camp Road. And the other great piece is Truck 56 will be going to service at the same time. So that's Antonio and Ortega, right there as Lapata goes up and across. So as we can continue to hopefully build up the one area where you guys can benefit from regionalization, it just brings depth to the city, and that the geography challenges. Another piece of it, and the mutual aid, although it's a separate county, separate EMS guidelines, separate protocols, but we continue to have our mutual aid auto aid agreement with Camp Hamilton. We are actually just starting a truck training and orientation with them because they're ladder trucks, so the far south end of San Clemente. If you start looking down there to get a second truck, we send 2 trucks to all of our structure fires, 3 to commercial fires. To get 3 ladder trucks to South San Clemente, you're pulling from Mission Viejo and Laguna Niguel, which takes a while. So
Lapata will have a ladder?
Lapata will, Ortega and Antonio's right there at the intersection.
Okay.
They'll have a ladder truck there, and it's a combination house with a medic engine as well. And then also continue to build up our mutual aid with Camp Hamilton. They've been great, well equipped, great equipment, and their people are want to be busier, so they're excited to continue to try to get pulled in. But we continue to utilize those and strengthen those relationships. But I'm available for any questions if you have any.
I do.
Okay. If I do it.
Regarding, we call it holding the wall thing.
Yes.
Okay, it affects his operation, and it affects your operation, and it affects the city. Have you seen an increase, a decrease, or is there much of a change? Is that something that we need to put on here, is the time? Because, side thought is if we had an emergency room in town, hospital, how would that influence this holding the wall effect?
So, and I'm gonna let Rob really answer into the trends of the APOT time, we call it, ambulance
patient offload time.
float time. It's very well tracked by county EMS, and I'm sure Care Ambulance. They are even more aware of it for the calls that go basic life support without a fire paramedic in it. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit to the trends in the APOT times. A little bit about, I've started to do some research on stats and data prior to San Clemente Hospital closing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got them today, so I haven't really been able to look through them yet. But just prior to the hospital closing, the 6 months post hospital closing, and what I've asked for is an update on, give me the last 12 months to show just before, just after, and then, I don't know how many years it's been, 6, 8 years after. And so that we can start to see how often your paramedics are being pulled out of the city. As far as care goes, and with the addition of the second full-time ambulance, so those were some of the mitigations that were put in place back then. And to pull those stats, I'm sure Care can pull some of them for their units to show the addition of that second ambulance and how beneficial that was to offset the impacts of the hospital closure. We can try to show the importance of making Engine 50 as that third paramedic unit to offset the hospital closure. And not only that, every city's getting busier as well, so to try to pull that out. to continue to reevaluate, are we properly staffed for EMS? Briefly brought up a town hall meeting that might be coming as far as discussing the impacts or benefits of the return of a community hospital here in San Clemente. And I think it's going to be pretty clear. You can find us another hospital to offload patients, another emergency room, paramedic receiving center to offload patients. It's only going to help. So we would absolutely, and whether it's here in San Clemente or just the fact of adding emergency rooms to South County, it's only going to benefit the business that we're in.
Has the OCFD, have they lobbied with the county, like the Board of Supervisors, to see if they'd like to participate in a hospital somewhere as far as the cost?
We have not. First of all, there's a shortage countywide and even outside of the county. So it's a fine line with that private business and the lobbying, and we have not really. What we've done is based on the given system. What mitigations do we need to do? Where do we need to upstaff? Where do we need to add units, like we did in Station 50, to continue to look at our response times? And when our response times are falling for whatever reason, really what's in our power and our control and our budget is how do we respond to that to maintain our response times? And where do we have to start? There's been starting to talk in San Juan with some of the guys saying to add a paramedic because they're a paramedic to the engine just to reduce that ALS response time because Medic 7 is getting pulled into Mission Hospital more. So although we can't necessarily fix the problem of adding hospitals, but what we do need to do is figure out within our budget, how do we respond, where do we add, and whether it's APOD times, whether it's increased construction and development, population, when our call loads go up and it starts affecting our response times, then we need to do our mitigations to ensure that we're still meeting that. South Orange County used to be a very quiet, rural little area, and it's not. Our fire stations were kind of spread out based on a fairly slow area of the county compared to what you see up in the north end. So as we continue to get busier and build out, and next we're going to start going higher and more full care facilities, that kind of thing. We'll continue to get busier, and we need to augment accordingly based on that. So we constantly are looking at it. And how it's handled is a little bit differently in each one of our cities based on whether it's a structural fire fund city or a cash contract city like San Clemente, and where that budget comes from. But for me to add a fire engine in San Clemente is going to have to be something that's in the contract, versus for me to add something somewhere else, like we're able to be adding around San Clemente with the growth of Rancho Mission Viejo, and that's coming out of the structural fire fund monies that comes through property tax and different. So that's our biggest thing, to say that we can have more opportunities and less drive times to offload patients. I think it's pretty common sense. It can only help.
Okay. Would you, I'm just asking for a recommendation to those APOC times to be included in your stats, because if they get up and up and up and up, it's either we don't have enough rigs in the city, or it's just taking so much time to get there, and when you get there at the hospital, the trauma center, whatever, sorry, you have to wait.
So those stats exist. Orange County EMS produces them, so they're not our stats.
Okay.
To have access to them, it's a public-facing
Right.
stats that exist. Is that something that you as a city should be watching? Absolutely. Yeah, and I think having conversations with your contracted ambulance provider to see how that's affecting your contract and your city's ambulance company, their ability to be making those turnaround times and making the response times. But I think some of those questions should be geared towards Rob Vieira.
Right.
But those stats exist. They're public facing and it's county EMSA. I can help you get in touch with them, or Rob probably looks at them every day. That data is coming from their responses countywide.
Okay,
And correct me if I'm wrong in any of that.
No, it's accurate.
okay. I just want to be able to give enough information here, because I'm sure the city council and other people, the city manager will be looking at these reports too, and if they see a trend, it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, at least they can grab and say, hey, what's going on here? Your suggestion is to grab another sheet of paper from the EMS agency, highlighting those things that affect our city specifically. That might be a better vehicle.
Yeah, and I think a question that I would have for Rob would be, are the APOT times affecting response times here in the city of St. Clemente for your ambulances?
I think APOT times are affecting, the extended APOT times, ambulance patient offload times, are affecting all ambulance providers, not just San Clemente, and not just California, but the nation. And so, a little background on APOT times. APOT times is measured from the time the ambulance pulls up to the hospital to the time the patient gets off the gurney. So and this is a state mandated requirement to report this up. And so the way they collect the data is from the ambulance personnel, EMTs on the ambulance, documenting those times in their electronic patient care record, which then goes to the county, which then takes the data and sends it to the state.
And what are those? What is that time basically for care?
The standard that the county has set up as the standard of care is 30 minutes. And that's and now it's a 30-minute 90th percentile, meaning 90% of the time the patient will be offloaded in 30 minutes.
It's pretty high, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's, again, I don't know how that number came about. It's been talked about at the county meetings and where that number, should it be 15 minutes, should it be 30? There's a lot of stakeholders, including hospitals, that have input on that.
And so do you know what the number is for San Clemente responses?
Well, you don't measure the number for San Clemente per se, you measure it at the hospital. Mission Hospital has an APOT time of this.
Okay, so what is that?
What Chief was talking about is you could go on a website right now at the OCEMS Core Measures is what it's called. And you could see the last 24 hours of the ambulance patient offload time for a specific hospital. Now, what we're experiencing with COVID, not just when it started really in the area in March 2020 until now, is previously ambulance patient offload times, they were relatively predictable. Okay, with COVID, it is not as predictable. And amazingly, 911 calls, where they come in, it's fairly predictable. You see that you can track the trends and see the heat maps of where, and that's how we figure out where to deploy resources. But with COVID, even recently, you've seen a spike in ambulance patient offload times, even during this recent surge. And so all that to say is resources are stretched at the hospitals, which has a trickle effect. And it's not just waiting for a bed to open up in the emergency room, but you have to have beds up on the hospital floor and ambulances to take them out and a place for them to go. So people flow into the emergency room up there. And so the challenge in this recent surge is staffing of hospitals. We have hospitals that we know that maybe have 2 or 3 nurses on duty in the emergency room. And so it doesn't matter how many beds they have. It matters how many patient to nurse ratio that they can do. Fortunately, in Orange County, we're in a better position than our neighbors to the north and south, I want to say. For example, in Los Angeles County right now, and I'm on calls every day during this for the past few months, every day with our EMS agency partners. They've got state resources into Los Angeles County to help staff the hospitals, and they just extended that through, I want to say, March. So nursing staff to come in, and they're running out of state resources, so now they're considering going to federal resources. In the north end of the county, in Orange County, they've Orange County EMS has deployed resources to 3 hospitals up there, paramedics to help staff the emergency room, 3 in the day, 3 at night. I want to say St. Jude, Los Alamitos, and I don't want to misquote the third one, but there's a third one. Anyway, all of them are there. So I'm hoping I'm giving some perspective on the ambulance patient outflow time, and if you have questions, please, I can dig into
Well,
more.
another facet in there is diversion.
Yes.
When the hospitals are full, they say, we want to be on diversion, divert these people elsewhere because we
Yeah, we can't
handle
take
it.
it.
So if I can share a little bit what's happening about diversion recently. So the medical director of County, Dr. Schultz, he kind of regulates the EMS system and certainly the ambulance. We report or regulated by the EMS agency and are held accountable to a lot of things to them. He's got tools in his toolbox that he can implement to help navigate this, and in my opinion, he's done a very good job in the county board doing that. One of the tools he has is hospital diversion, and they track how many times a hospital has to close to ambulance traffic. Once it reaches about 200 hours in a certain period of time, it's almost as if let me backtrack a little bit. If a hospital's closed and our ambulance personnel want to go to that hospital, it's closed, they go to the next one. If that one's closed, they go to the next one. If that one's closed, they go back to the first one. So essentially it's open. So there was too much of that going on because it reaches that level. And he said, we're going to suspend hospital diversion, meaning every hospital is open no matter what. So, and then but that just tells you, and that's currently the status we're in right now and have been in for quite a few weeks. And his trigger for that he looks at is the ambulance patient offload time. He really keeps an eye on that. And if that average or that 90th percentile can get below 50 minutes, it's when he considers stopping diversion. But right now I want to say countywide it's above 50 minutes. So 90% of the time you're going to be waiting 50 minutes to get off that ambulance.
So we go back to the fire and the ambulance folks, ALS type people, advanced life support. They're stuck at the emergency room. We can't handle right now, standby. Now, I've been monitoring some of these EMS things, and they're talking about a policy they're putting together where after an hour of standing on the wall, and the second ambulance crew comes in, and after 15 more minutes,
Yes.
that one of them can opt to say, I got to get back in the field, and the county has cots. I don't know where they store them, but they can offload that patient and disappear.
Sure.
Go back into the field and grab support. Right?
I can share some more perspective on that.
Thank you.
So that's another tool in the toolbox that Dr. Schultz has provided. So you're absolutely correct. If an ambulance has been in a hospital for 60 minutes, a second ambulance shows up and is there for 15, that first ambulance is now eligible to put that patient on a cot. The EMS agency has deployed cots and are using us as the resource to move them around. And so we physically took possession of cots in different hubs that we have. We empower our operation managers or field supervisors that are on trucks, not ambulances, that when they identify that, and they have different ways to monitor it or get a phone call from an ambulance crew, they can then show up at the hospital. And one of the first steps they take is try to work with the emergency department staff. The last thing we want to do is deploy a cot. It's pretty archaic and just not something we want to do. And so working with them, and oftentimes just the threat of the cot arriving, things get moving. And we've been pretty successful at doing that and have minimized the cot deployment, as we call it. We track all that, the EMS section, Orange County EMS Agency, on the electronic patient care record. There's a box to put cot deployed per OC EMS letter 4212, that's the number that reference it. Addition to that, there's another letter that just came out, 4246, I want to say, that gives it even more teeth. That way, if you have, and we haven't actually had to do this yet, if you have two ambulances holding the wall or waiting there to offload your patient, that you don't have to wait that hour anymore. You can deploy the cot immediately if you got two ambulances there, if the ambulance crews agree that this ambulance crew will watch the other patient. So you've got one ambulance crew watch two patients. And the whole goal is to get the ambulances back on the road. It actually puts a little pressure on the hospital to get a bed. And so those are tools that have helped us, I should say, I don't know if it's, get ambulances back on the road, which is the goal.
Now, when you have an ALS and the paramedic jumps in your rig, goes to the hospital, you got the engine, comes to pick up the paramedic, perhaps. But that paramedic stays with that ambulance crew until the emergency department accepts that patient. How does that work?
So what we still have in San Clemente, we were forced to suspend it in our other areas, but we have a thing that's called Paramedic Bring Back Program. So this is one of the benefits that San Clemente still has with your contract. So what we've done is, to run a medical aid, you need 2 paramedics. So you run the first medical aid, and it's a BLS patient, it's just going to go to the ambulance. If it's an ALS patient but stable, we'll send 1 paramedic in the ambulance, and that's the paramedic that goes to the hospital and gets stuck on the wall.
Right.
One of the things that we've put in place to try to deal with that paramedic being stuck and out of the city and the loss of San Clemente's hospital is what we did is we bought a second set of ALS gear. That second set of ALS gear, so now engine, say 50, goes back in service with 1 paramedic and a whole set of ALS gear. So they can still respond, as we call it, Paramedic Assessment Unit, PAU. They will still respond to a second call in their first due. Start making a paramedic assessment. We'll still have to send a full paramedic, so truck 59, engine 60, or engine 29 from Dana Point. We'll have to send a second unit, but you still keep that reduced time of your ALS level care. So we actually have 2 sets of paramedic gear on all 3 of your units. If it's a ALS care, so let's say it's a full arrest and both paramedics are required to go in the ambulance to Mission Hospital, then that unit is out of service, the engine will go and pick up their paramedics.
So your paramedic has to ride with care because that type of call requires 2 paramedics to be with a patient?
ALS, Orange County Fire is the ALS provider for, here in Orange County, for our 23 cities, unincorporated county, including the city of San Clemente.
So a non-sworn
We are-
paramedic can't.
We are the ALS providers. Orange County Fire is the ALS provider.
All right.
CARE is transport and BLS provider.
But one of your people on your ambulance is a paramedic, is that correct?
No, we
No.
have emergency medical technicians, BLS
Oh,
care.
okay,
Yeah,
EMT.
the system we have set up, a very good system.
Okay.
is what the chief
All right.
described.
So here in San Clemente, especially because of the challenges of your geography, the closure of the hospital, the increased wall times, for us to have that paramedic unit go out of service with care and go sit up at Mission Hospital or Mission Laguna, we lose a pump and we lose 3-person capability. So we have that depth. So if we could send 1 medical aid, a majority of our ALS calls are stable. They still require a paramedic, an escort, an IV, some drug therapy. But it allows us to keep that unit in the city available, and once again, trying to reduce that, keep that 7 minutes and 20 seconds for ALS care is what we shoot for. So that we call it Paramedic Bring Back Program. We had it throughout the city, but throughout a lot of Orange County in collaboration with CARE, where CARE literally will bring that paramedic back to the fire station. Because you guys have your own 2 ambulances, so when they leave Mission Hospital, they come back to the city. Elsewhere in the county, we were forced to stop that temporarily because of the impact on care and their availability and the APOC times and whatnot. So here in San Clemente and also in Westminster, I think they're still doing it, right?
Correct.
The 2 cities that have a similar contract directly with, you have your 201 rights directly with the city and CARE, allows us to still do that paramedic bring back program, keep that depth, and try to keep our units in service in the city.
Sounds like we're fortunate to have two ambulances available with to back you guys up.
If you look throughout the county that we serve, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's working better in San Clemente and Westminster than it is anywhere else in Orange County that we serve, unless you're seeing it differently.
No, it's different areas, there's advantages and disadvantages. You're certainly reaping the benefits of this type of program because where you are geographically. And then you're also taking advantage of the regional approach. Care Ambulance also has resources around you. For example, you have 2 ambulances that traditionally don't leave the city because they're dedicated to it.
Right.
They're dispatched by the Orange County Fire Authority to calls in San Clemente only.
And that's, is Dana Point covered by CARE also?
We are. Dana
Okay,
Point,
so
also-
both of our ambulance somehow got on something and a third one came and Dana Point would come down and backfill.
Yeah, so that's that regional approach, and actually in 2021, that happened 392 times.
Wow.
Where we sent an ambulance almost once a day, just a little over once a day, you had a need for another ambulance. And to be in all transparency, how many times did your 2 ambulances leave the city? It was 10. With 5 of those times being this past, I want to say about 5 of those times being in December. And that is working in coordination with Orlando CFA Dispatch because there was a difference could be made to somebody, let's say in Dana Point or San Juan Capistrano, but it did not leave the city with 0 ambulances. That was only done when there was at least both of them were available.
Do you staff ALS rates?
Does Care Ambulance staff ALS rate? Not in Orange County, and in Los Angeles County we have I think 2.
So you're all BLS?
We're all BLS. Yeah.
So your paramedic puts everything on, that takes everything with them that they need.
Correct.
Okay.
Here in San Clemente, they're actually working out of our fire stations with us. They're dispatched by us. It's different than Dana Point. Dana Point, Orange County has 5 EOAs.
Correct.
What are they? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
AOAs, A, B, C, D, emergency exclusive operating areas.
So it's five areas. So Dana Point, Laguna Niguel, San Juan. That's a contract between the county, and it's managed by county EMS, by the county and CARE. Your contract is from the city and CARE. Those cities don't have 201 rights. They've never transported, they've never had their own fire department, so it's a completely different system. So you're almost mutual aid. Even though CARE is in San Clemente and in Dana Point, it's almost a mutual aid request to ask Dana Point or the county EOA's ambulances to come down. Dana Point, San Juan, Laguna Niguel do not have a contract directly with CARE like the city of San Clemente does because of your 201 rights and the fact that back in the day, you guys through San Clemente Fire Department, you used to transport your own patients.
Who bills the patients for the service, and who receives the money for that?
So the way the city set up with the city,
Yeah.
the city has a contractor, in this case I believe it's Whitman, that does the billing. So we do all the patient care recording and the paperwork, it goes into our system and gets forwarded to Whitman to do the billing. Since our service is not based on, we don't bill the patient, care doesn't bill the patient, we're sending that bill to San Clemente for the service we're providing.
So I believe that the cost, or what they charge, those funds go to the city. It offsets the care.
Well, that's what I
contract.
was wondering, yeah.
And from the numbers that I see, it's the city's in the plus.
But the patient goes through like insurance or whatever first before the city gets billed, or is that right? I mean, doesn't insurance cover you?
Just like any vendor, we send a monthly, or it might be here weekly, I'm not sure, depending on what it is, monthly invoice to the city of San Clemente for the services we provide. All the billing and the insurance and everything is through the city's contracted billing service.
Oh, okay.
So we don't touch that. We have no patient contact.
We also have a subscription program also.
The city may, doesn't involve us.
Donna Whitman?
Whitman is the service, yeah, I believe.
Yeah, I think the city has a subscription program where a resident can have subscribe to it, and then they come out to their house, and all of a sudden they don't have to pay for that.
Oh,
It's like a private
A lot
insurance
of people
for
don't know
them.
about that, but it's a
No,
service that
right.
that's interesting.
so it's an annual fee that residents pay.
And just some background on the subscription services. Generally, it will take care of the copay. They may still bill your insurance,
They bill
but
insurance.
but if you owe anything else after that, it usually would.
Right.
But if you don't have insurance, the subscription thing's for you.
Yeah.
Because, okay, what are you gonna do? Yeah, so that's not really publicized. So
I've never heard of it. I've lived here
When we
22
used to
years.
go
I've never
first,
heard of it.
It's called
Okay.
public awareness.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
There's a lot of things out there, you know, sure. Okay, Rob?
Anything else on,
Well,
Mine?
the only question again, is this sufficient enough to tell your story, or is there more information that needs to be here to?
I think what's important with this is that and what I like about it is that we've been reporting a lot of the same data for years and years and years. And so you can look for changes, you can look for trends. So I think that, we can always get more and answer questions if you have something else. I like the fact that this, for the most part, covers the basics. It shows the trends. And we all know the challenges here in this city with the geography and the number of stations that we have.
And we're an island, the peninsula at the end of the county.
Right.
Yeah, Rob, what you say, I think, is good, but these statistical measures to the ordinary person, we don't have the insight that you have in understanding that and pointing it out. So either we need to get some more measures here that describe, staffing issues, vehicle issues, COVID-19, that sort of thing. Or you need, when you come to these meetings, be prepared to let us know what you are reading, interpreting these, and what the issues are, so we can pass them on to the city council. I don't know.
So my question
Yeah.
to you is, as we do this, these quarterly metrics, who's our audience? It's always been the city, and hopefully, with
Yeah.
this group, a group that can look through these with me, and we can spend time to explain what we're looking at. If I was going to go talk to a town hall meeting, I wouldn't be bringing these same, but these have been the metrics that we report to the city, not necessarily to the person out on the streets.
Right.
If we're going to have that discussion, then that's a separate request that we can do. So my question to you is, what's missing, what's not clear on this, so that we can clear that up for you.
Well, my comment was not directed to the people on the street, but directly to our role here as the communicating with the city council and what your issues are, what your problems are, and your successes too. And I saw the article in the Register, by the way, where you were talking about adding another city to the Orange County Fire. They did pretty good. But we need that. Like when I was board of trustees for the fire station in Utah, the fire chief would come in and he'd say, "I got a bulldozer that only turns right." And we'd say, "Why is that?" And he says, "Well, one of the treads out. I need to fix it." I mean, he got down in the details like that, so we really knew what was going on and where the issues were, what was good, what was bad. These numbers, I think, you have the knowledge to let us know what the real issues are with these things, and the good things too, that we can then pass on to the council. So if you would come into these meetings, just like you both of you did today, you illuminated me tremendously on the ambulances and how you guys are cooperating and taking care of these problems. That would be, I think, very helpful, very, very useful. Then these statistical things are probably all right. But just the numbers themselves, there's a lot more that's going on that needs to be known by the city council to serve the residents of San Clemente.
And I hear what you're saying, and remember that we also have another leg to this. So Council Member Ward, who is the director on the OCFA board, and once a month she comes to our board meetings and is the representative for the council to hear a lot of what you're talking about, specific issues facing the city. So a lot of this with the ambulances, and us trying to address an aging helicopter fleet and truck company purchases, and a lot of those overarching departmental concerns and issues are absolutely communicated to her, not only from the fire chief, but as well as between her and I. If you're asking, do I have specific concerns for the city of San Clemente that I need fixed? I don't right now. If you look at our quarterly stats, we talked about the fractile. Our standards are 7 minutes, 20 seconds, 80% of the time. That's what our board-approved stats are. And if you look at yours, you are at 60% of the time. So if we were going to truly go down and start looking at how to fix that, I have no problem having those discussions if there's a desire to do that. What that's going to most likely lead towards is additional fire stations, additional fire engines. So if that's direction from our council that we want to start going down, I would happily have those discussions. Day-to-day operations, I communicate with Councilmember Ward, and I'd like to be able to do it with this group as well. But if you have specific questions or concerns, I'd love to know them.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this last meeting, and we don't have the time to hash all that stuff out here. I think the overview that you gives us is fine, and if one of the members here decides that they would like to come see you and talk about those things and hash things out before it comes to the committee, we think that would be a lot better than trying to hash things out here. So that's, I think, how we're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always available, and if you have concerns, want to learn more about it, I want to learn how we can continue to make fire and EMS service better here in the city of San Clemente. I've got all kinds of ideas, and we can sit down and do that, especially if there's some council support to start moving that direction. I'd love to spend some time with you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think we can help Director Ward respond to your conversations. You're just another part of the city government that
Absolutely.
would help you. And she's stretched pretty thin too.
Sure.
But where we're not, at least, I don't think stretched as thin as she is. She's dealing a lot more controversial issues. So she's got a heavy workload. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me know what else I can do.
Door's open. Yeah. The door may not open, but the window's cracked. Okay,
Thank
great.
you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Chief.
Your ambulance.
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Oh,
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Got the invite, first meeting, got the invite from Adam, and first meeting here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you go over some of these figures with us
Okay.
and give you an idea of how we're doing?
Yeah, point out what they mean.
Sure. As Chief had mentioned, he described fractile response time versus average. The way the contract's laid out, you're looking at fractile response times. So the response times meaning code 2, we get to the
Well, let me ask you,
Yes, sir.
I tried to find out, code 3 I understand, code 1, code 2 is like this amorphous thing. What does that really mean, code 2?
Think of it this way.
Lights
We're
and sirens?
either
No?
responding lights and sirens or not responding lights and sirens. So your 2 ambulances in the city of San Clemente are dispatched by the Orange County Fire Authority and sent to the calls. And so all the information is passed to the crew from the Orange County Fire Authority Dispatch Center, and they go to the call. They're the ones that determine if they're going lights and sirens based on patient need or no lights and sirens.
Code 2 is just without delay.
Yeah,
Well, what's code 1 then?
there is no code.
No, I never heard of it.
Oh, there isn't any in
We
here? in
skipped
this-
that, we skipped that number.
No, real police are.
Can I get the proper spelling in your name for the minutes?
It's Robert,
Thank you.
last name Vieira, V as in Victor, I-E-R-A.
Thank you so much.
And let me a little background on myself here. I've been with Care Ambulance since 1996. Started as an EMT, worked my way up through the organization, and actually in November became the managing director for Orange County. So just my perspective is just, I've had the advantage of being in one organization in one area for my career. And so I guess that's what I'm bringing to the table. And having the understanding of what it used to be like holding the wall at a hospital for a long period of time. And so I think all of us here want to have the best interest of making sure that the citizens are taken care of, responding quickly. That's just to the call, because that's what we want. So, and your system out here is set up very well. You have an advantage of having your rights to maintain your ambulance service, which you do. And in fact, in 2015, when we became a partner, the city ambulance service was run by the fire department, and then we partnered up with them and transitioned to what you see today. So I think it's working out pretty well. To go into the numbers a little bit there, no lights and sirens, we're required to get there within 15 minutes. With lights and sirens, required to get there within 10 minutes, 90% of the time. And if you look at the historical data, which I believe some of it was sent to you, not just this quarter here, but previous quarters, we meet that standard most of the time. We may see some fluctuations there as the code 3, and that's challenging because you don't get as many code 3 calls. And so if you miss one, then it's a volume game. How many more are you gonna get or not? The way the system is, well, there's advantages and disadvantages. Like if you were, I'm sure, made to ask me, like, well, how can we improve those numbers or do anything? One of the things we do in the other areas, like Dana Point, Laguna Niguel, is what we call system status management, where when an ambulance goes on a call, we start moving ambulances around to appropriate predetermined posts to have the best opportunity to respond in case another call comes in to meet that time. We don't do that at San Clemente, but you have 2 ambulances at the stations, okay, and they're dispatched for the Orange County Fire Code. Do I think it's an issue right now? Not at all. I think what you see here is good response times for the citizens in the city overall. Like I mentioned before, we had surge 392 times. We came into the city to help out because both ambulances were occupied. That's the advantage you have of having a partnership with a company, a provider like us. We can bring in those resources, and then that area isn't left uncovered. We start that's that regional approach, moving ambulances down that way. Or if you have a large disaster, you're not relying on just your 2 ambulances. Maybe a train collision in the city that could prompt multiple ambulances. We're able to bring in those resources.
Right.
Additional to that, we're also the region. California is broken into 6 regions. We are the Region 1 Ambulance Transportation Coordinator. So if you have a need for 20 ambulances for whatever it may be for an extended period of time, we'd be the ones coordinating it, not just care units, but units throughout the region.
Now, I see different names on your rigs.
Yes.
Flock. or
It's Falk. So, yeah, a little history behind that. It's actually, our official name is Falk Mobile Health Corp, doing business as Care Ambulance Service. Care Ambulance Service started at Carl Richardson in 1969 with 1 ambulance built in his garage, a story similar across the country with a lot of other ambulance services. His 2 sons, Dan and Rick, took over in 1985 and continued to grow the business. In 2010, we were purchased by Falk, which is a Danish company, over 120, probably now 120 years old or so. It's the largest ambulance and healthcare provider, one of the largest ambulance healthcare providers in the world. And so we were the first U.S. acquisition in 2010. How that impacted local operations, it really did not. It provided support, it provided capital, it provided other things. Right about that time, we transitioned to electronic patient care records, which was a very expensive investment. They came on board to help support that. And so, like I said, I've been with the organization since, I remember Carl Richardson coming in with his cane, hitting me up, hey, get to work, get me out of the bed in the morning. A great guy, great family, and they put it in the hands of a good organization that I'm now part of as well. So we're going through a rebranding right now, so you'll see a lot more Falk ambulance. Falcon is Falcon, it's a red and white, but it's the same players, same leadership at a local level, how to run the organization.
How's your radio communication with Orange County Fire Authority and dispatching and other interactions you have to have with them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. All of our 911 ambulances in the county of Orange have 800 megahertz radio, which is the communication radio that the Orange County Fire Authority uses, so we're able to communicate with them. We also have our own radios, business band that we operate on. It has multiple repeaters, and it is a little more challenging in South County here. So we have different repeaters we can switch to. In addition to that, we actually have an employee app that we have. We call it Blink, and it's an app for our employees, and we have a separate chat channel in there. So if they're like in the hospital in Laguna, right there, it's very challenging to get out radio traffic wise. They can go to that chat channel and just let them know, hey, we're on scene at the hospital, and our dispatch is constantly monitoring that as well. So we have multiple redundancies.
Are these repeaters, the 800 megahertz repeaters, or are these, something unique to your company?
The 800 megahertz system is a county-owned system
Right.
that's operated on, so they have their own repeaters.
Right.
Ambulance, we have a vendor radio service that has repeaters that we are authorized to be on and use, and multiple channels, so
Okay.
A lot of redundancy.
a lot of redundancy.
It's life safety stuff.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other things that we need to know that this report shows?
Well, I get on the communication, San Clemente notorious for not having good RF communication because of the hills and valleys. I mean, is that an issue with any of your calls or anything? Are the repeaters positioned in pretty good shape? Or?
Yeah, it's geographic, a lot of it's line of sight to get
Exactly,
to that repeater.
yeah.
So there are some challenges there, but that's where that backup communication, whether it's the Blink app text, whether it's another switching over to another repeater, or just plain old calling a cell phone.
Cell phone.
The two ambulances though in your city are really operating or are communicating with Orange County Fire. So any communication challenges there, I don't know of any.
Can they go ambulance to engine, or do you have to go through? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
there
for
are
the
redundancies.
okay.
Yeah, when I said they're dispatched by them, there's really no communication with care besides letting us know they have a call. And then in our computer system, we can assign them the call so that they can fill out their electronic patient care record. There's certain, because that's on our system.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is dated October 6th. When is the next one going to come out?
So this is third quarter of 2021.
That's what it says, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we should be working on it right now. One of the things that I transitioned to my new role is just reevaluating all our contracts and the requirements to send appropriate reports, and just rebuilding that process. And I've been in talks with city manager on that, Eric, to make sure we're getting you guys that information. And another gentleman, an analyst, I was just speaking to him the other day, Matt, I think it was. And so I'm building. I'm a big process person, just personality. Plus, that's a little bit more about my background. And so, making sure that we're sending the information you need on a timely manner as required.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would help us
Yep.
get the up-to-date information.
It's important. Yeah.
Good job.
Very good. Thank you for your help down here.
Yeah, good to meet you.
You as well.
Yeah, let you know we're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good thing.
I've been your patient, by the way. You
Oh.
guys, and my family. So, yeah, we've been your guests several times.
Very good.
Just backtrack to Rob.
Yes.
We received these legislative reports, very, very helpful.
They're helpful, huh?
Absolutely. And if you come up with any more, then,
Jay Barkman puts that together. That's what he does for us, and so it's super helpful having him.
yeah, wonderful.
Good.
So let's see. Now we're into new business. And the name on here is County Diversion Theft Enforcement. Captain Bedford. Do you have anything? Report by Captain Bedford in consideration of recommendation of City Council initiated amendment to the municipal code to address theft of cattle converters.
Yeah, I have a PowerPoint. It's short, but
Great.
But I don't know how to work this fancy speed. It's just attached to nothing.
I can open PowerPoint if
Okay, yeah.
if there's a.
It should be the only thing on this. Should be.
Okay, are you sure you won't? Everybody close their eyes for a minute.
How many slides is it?
I think 6 or 7. It's short.
6, 8?
Yeah, 60 or 70. Be out here by 8.
60 or 70.
And there's some background info. There's not probably much on here that maybe people in this room haven't already heard.
Joe's an expert, I know.
Go through it quickly. This is when I realize how old my eyes are getting. It's a big.
Well, don't make it really big though. So.
You're a puppy.
Yeah,
The puppy will.
Oh, my.
I know.
Okay, bear with me. I don't know if it's recognizing this.
Okay, we can just talk about it.
Ooh, the bell, that sounds good.
All right, I apologize. It's not reading it for you.
No problem. So just some background info. First of all, what a catalytic converter is. It's an emission control device. It's located between the engine and the muffler on a vehicle and the tailpipe. And its whole purpose is to reduce pollutants or toxic gases that come from a combustible engine or tailpipe. Why those things are attractive to thieves is because they contain some precious metals in them. It's one or all or a combination of rhodium, palladium, and platinum. Those can be extracted from the catalytic converter, and then those can be exchanged for cash, right? Sold to recyclers or scrap yards. The other reason they're attractive is because they are very, very easy to remove from a vehicle with an electric saw, like a sawzall, something to that effect. We see these suspects in the field. They can do this in just a couple minutes, and that's with jacking up your car. They bring their own jacks with them, jack up your car, they're under there. It's like a NASCAR pit crew. It's actually fairly impressive. To get a scope on the problem that we have here in San Clemente, or an idea of it, if you're going to present information to the council, is last year in San Clemente we had 91 reported stolen catalytic converters. This year so far, in just January so far, we've had 12 stolen already.
Since January?
Since January at 12. 91 all of last year. That's not, I mean, that's terrible, but that's not that bad compared to a lot of cities in Orange County. Irvine had almost 394 stolen, I think, in 21. But, you know, if it's your catalytic converter, one is too many. They are costly to fix for the consumer, the victim. Anywhere between $1,000 up to $3,000, maybe even $4,000 to repair. Most of these are done through insurance claims, and you're left paying the deductible. Some challenges for us as law enforcement is how quickly you can steal one. Oftentimes the suspects are gone before the deputies are even dispatched, which makes it difficult, of course. On top of that, these crews are fairly nomadic. They are generally crews of people, and this is what they do. And so they'll come out and hit, say, San Clemente maybe a night or two in a row, and then they're gone for maybe a week. Because there are multiple crews, sometimes we get hit several days in a row, and then it might be a week or two with nothing, and then another cycle. I think last year in January, just to give you an idea of how unpredictable it can be from an enforcement standpoint, in January we had 24 stolen last year total, and in May we had 1 stolen. So it's all across the board. From a targeted or directed enforcement approach, it's like needle in haystack. You really don't know where to set up. There are more attractive vehicles to take these from. The Toyota Prius is always at the top of the list. Your large vehicles, like large SUVs, they have more minerals in the catalytic converter, and therefore they're a more valuable target. But your hybrid vehicles have more of those minerals because they need to reduce more of the pollutants and the toxic gases, which is what makes them desirable to the public, right? Is they're more green, they're more healthy for the environment. We do try and do targeted enforcement. Our TRIP team and our DET team, our DET team has actually been fairly successful, and they are working a number of known crews at the moment. It happened, and they arrest them, and they get right back out, go right back to work, because the repercussions are small and the rewards are big.
Do these crews, I'm just curious, demographically, what part of the county do they seem to reside in?
Well, oftentimes not even in the county.
Right.
So we get a lot of business from LA, and of course, because of where we're situated, you get people from San Diego as well. But we do have people from all over the place. There are some locals that do this, although generally it's not. We don't see locals doing it. It's more of a northern county and out of the county issue. Like I said, they're nomadic, so they travel around, try to spread it around, so they don't draw too much attention to themselves.
If we get license plate readers in the city, that might help.
It will help, and we have dozens of vehicles identified as suspect vehicles. The problem is, when do they come back, and where do you find them? People don't often keep their vehicle registered at the address where they actually live. So there are other enforcement problems with that. But
Well, people, I thought some of the organizations have requested people to engrave their names or numbers or code. You're
Yeah,
probably
that's-
going to get into
that's one of the
that.
possibilities,
Will
and
that
we're-
help?
We'll cover that here in just a
yeah,
minute when we
okay.
get to the, like, maybe potential recommendations that you guys might consider looking into. We have had success, but some successes come with failures. We have stopped people with catalytic converters in their possession. There's no law against that, which is one of the potential solutions. You cannot, because catalytic converters are not automatically serialized by the manufacturer. So you cut one off, there's no way to figure out what vehicle it came from. So it becomes very problematic for deputies in the field, even proactive enforcement. When you get someone, you might have probable cause if they have a sawzall with them and sawzall blades and gloves and a jack, and they have a number of catalytic converters. We could probably arrest that person and get them put into jail. But as many of us know, the old adage is true: no victim, no crime. And if you can't trace those catalytic converters back to an actual victim, you have no case the DA cannot file. So etching now becomes an avenue, right? If you can somehow associate that converter to that vehicle, and what's common practice is etching the vehicle's license plate into the converter, it absolutely will not deter that thing from getting stolen, because the crook, even if they see it, they're gonna roll the dice and think they're not gonna get caught before they can get that to the scrapyard. In most cases, they're probably right, but in some cases, they are wrong, and these people are stopped. And we do have crews actively following and surveilling some of these people, some of our crews, I should say. And so when they stop a car full of catalytic converters, it'd be a great tool, and it would lead to a successful prosecution if some of those were etched. You could actually tie them back to a victim. If we're talking about the other end of it, which is the law, the fact that there's a lack of a law, something that is already in place. Irvine PD already put one on their books, and it's a municipal code, and I included the exact language in my slide, but what I'll do when I leave here is I'll forward the PowerPoint to you all, so that you can flip through it and see all the stuff that I forgot to say.
Awesome.
But in there is the language for them. It's unlawful possession of a catalytic converter. Basically says that if you're in possession of a catalytic converter and you don't have immediate proof that verifies that it belongs to you, or that you just purchased it from your friend or whatever, then it's a misdemeanor. It's a meaning code violation. You could be cited or arrested for that violation. So that would be my recommendations to you guys, is consider two things. A, the etching. It gives us a tool we can enforce in the field. And then B, a muni code, another tool that we can enforce in the field. Our deputies have stopped people with these catalytic converters. They have done it. And then likewise, we've stopped people with the sawzall, the gloves, the jacks, but no, got them before the act, right? Again, not much crime. You can try to go bird tools on that, but good luck with getting a fine.
Last February, one was stolen out of our work truck in front of my house.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that 2 hours later, an hour later, these guys were pulled over. And so they got the converter, and I had called it in the next day, and there was a blade out in the street, and they came and picked it up. So lo and behold, I did catch 4 guys. So, and they called and asked if I was gonna press charge, and I said, well, yes, I will. That's been over close to a year now. So even though we find who it is, then all of a sudden we got the court thing to deal with for a year or so.
Doesn't mean the DA is gonna file.
Yeah, and so that's a problem there too, isn't it? I mean,
Yes, and that's the problem with all crime, not just this, right? It's the back end of the DA's office, and how long it takes to get some sort of resolution on this. And in the
and what the
meanwhile,
punishment is.
what do you suppose those guys are out doing?
Right now, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Paying for a lawyer.
And we actually just had the same thing where someone was a witness, and I think it was Aliso Viejo, called it in, but the crew had left, but one of our deputies spotted him down here and stopped him, so we were able to take that cat back and match it up to the car, confirm it was the right one, and then arrest those subjects on that.
And
What
there-
about the point of purchase, though? Would the etching help them? I mean, why don't these companies that buy this stuff be required to identify them that they aren't stolen?
I mean, you'd be talking about like the state legislature. Are you talking about for the manufacturer of the vehicle?
No, I'm talking about people
Scrap.
that they.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There are investigations. Obviously, scrap yards are part of the problem, right? Because you can drive in with a truckload of catalytic converters and exchange that for money, and there's not a lot of questions asked. And so I think that's the point of possible future legislation. I know that there are law enforcement agencies that are watching scrap yards and recycling centers as well. to try to see if they're more not just an innocent buyer, they're
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
involved in this. And so that's something that we do look at. And just for information, a thief can expect anywhere from $50 to $250 for your catalytic converter. It's going to cost you $1,000 to $4,000 to fix. But hybrid vehicles, you can get upwards. In my PowerPoint, I used a conservative number of $1,000, but we know that large SUVs and some hybrid vehicles, you can get up to $1,500 per converter. So there's a huge incentive to continue doing this, even though you may have caught a case or two, and kind of antithetical to my point, especially if it's only a muni code and it's a misdemeanor, not a lot of teeth there, but we have nothing else. I'd rather be able to take them to jail and physically book them unlikely to continue, where they'll get released, of course, but we can at least take that property from them and reduce their incentive for that night's work, and plus they catch a criminal case over it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like, because this would normally be brought up in comments, but if we could go out of order, I'd like to make a motion that we put the catalytic converter situation on our agenda for our next meeting, so we can actually start working on getting a recommendation to the city council.
Actually, I think because catalytic converter theft enforcement is on the agenda, and it says consideration of a recommendation to city council to initiate an amendment, the public safety committee can recommend the council adopt an ordinance to address the issue. The county sheriff's department to prepare an ordinance with the city attorney to take to city council
Would you
for
like to
adoption.
amend your?
I will amend, I'll make a very friendly amendment to my.
To your own motion.
To my own motion. I move that the Public Safety Committee forward a recommendation per our white paper process that we passed a couple of months ago.
Forecast.
To this,
Our
plan. To the city council recommending that a municipal code section addressing possession of catalytic converters be passed.
Can you add theft and possession?
Well, I think theft is already in, and it's just possession.
unlawful possession.
Unlawful possession in the Muni Code. So that would be my motion.
And then to circle back to your point about the etching.
Yeah.
Many South County cities, maybe not many South County cities, but several South County cities and many cities elsewhere have partnered up with shops or mechanics who will host an event, an etching event. Lake Forest just did one. It's their little flyers that you on the PowerPoint. And they managed to work with a specific mechanic who agreed to do it for free. And I think they registered over 150 vehicles that day. And their flyer said the first 50 were free. And I believe the payoff for that particular mechanic was that it went out citywide and named his shop, so it would draw potential business to him or maybe future business for etching. So that's something the city can and should look into doing for a number of reasons, but none of which, including just raising community awareness. I think a lot of people just don't know that we get no traction if we can't bring this thing back to your vehicle.
Simplicity, I'd like to see if we can pass the motion about the Muni Code first.
Yeah.
So I made a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? I think it's kind of good.
Just hammering out the wording.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what's missing though is that they have to have proof of ownership for it to be a misdemeanor, to be an arrest. Just passing a municipal code, having it doesn't mean anything. How do you prove that it's not theirs? Shouldn't that be in the ordinance or the code?
Well, I think we'll go by the wording that's in the Irvine when we get that.
And it lists proof of
Okay, so we're going to detail this out later.
Yeah, but we're gonna.
Okay, so this will be your motion.
And
Then etching will be another motion.
that was going to be a separate one. This is just on the Muni Code.
Mr. Chairman, are you going to call for a vote?
I am going to call it. All in favor?
Aye.
a lot of money on.
Okay. So now, and we now figure out the wording on the, do you want to lump the etching and the education, that, whatever that, as far as the
let's look at what Irvine's got.
Yeah.
We can kind of.
Yeah, I just want to get the wording right to see what we're actually recommending the city to do.
But we may be forgetting some other nuances that need to be in there too. So Irvine's a pretty inclusive type thing. It's working for them. That gives a good.
Yeah, they had a very big problem last year, obviously, with nearly 400.
Well, then
Has it made a difference?
That I don't
know yet. We've not enough time to tell.
Yeah, we'll see this year, right? Now that we'll be able to compare this year's statistics to last year's, and I wouldn't anticipate a reduction in the number of stolen, but it would be interesting to see how many they were able to recover, arrests, made convictions, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, when Adam gets back, he's going to look at the Irvine thing. He'll put together a wording of this, which will come back to our next meeting, and we can approve it then, or not approve it, whatever.
Consider it, yeah.
You consider it, yeah.
So it should include public education.
Well, I was thinking that as a separate motion.
Even
besides
another motion? 3 motions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
That's all right.
Well, do you guys want to get into the details of the ordinance, or you just want to
No,
recommend
we
that
just
the
want this
sheriff's
passed
department
right
work
now.
with the city attorney on an ordinance to
That sounds better.
That's fine, because we don't have the wording.
No.
We couldn't possibly put together the wording at this meeting. We can just recommend that some municipal codes should be, adopted, and that's our recommendation.
Yeah.
The wording will have to be put together
Based
by
on the sheriff's input.
the sheriff, city attorney.
Yeah.
I think the Irvine municipal code would be very helpful when we see exactly how that was
One of the
written.
problems I see with that stenciling on is once they confiscate the stolen material, it's
They
not
can
going to
grind.
sit for a year. So you're going to get another catalytic converter anyhow. You want to drive your car, so you get this new catalytic converter. And so, yes, it's etched, but
No, I don't think the etching is going to get you back your catalytic converter, but
Well.
it's further evidence that it's not their catalytic
It's going to
converter.
tie them to the.
Tie them to the
Yeah,
fact that it's not theirs.
that it's stolen.
so if they picked up someone that doesn't have it etched, they're still
But if they did pick up somebody that had a license number or a CalOp etched in there,
Yeah, they know it's
they
not
could
theirs.
contact a possible victim, and so then they would have a solid case.
Like
So
a
it's
stolen gun.
Yeah, or a TV when people use the etch or stuff on there, all the property. It's a good idea. We just have to figure out how we want to word that to present it. Is the only.
Just a point of information, Joe. How long did it take to get? Was there a catalytic converter available to put on your truck?
Oh, yeah.
away?
Oh, yeah, I got it the next day.
Okay, because with all this shipping problems and everything.
Well, this
is
was
a while
long
ago.
ago, it was a year ago, so,
You
yeah,
know,
it was the next day.
And people don't know that until it happens. They're a victim. And,
No, it's a scramble.
oh, yeah, good.
That's essentially the presentation right there.
And I'd still like to bring back to mull over the etching and the cooperation with shops or mechanics or whatever. I'd like to bring that back at our next meeting. Maybe we can hammer out some wording or whatever to get a better recommendation.
There's an action item right there.
Yeah, it's an action item, exactly. So
Get a status report on all that.
Well, I'm disappointed I didn't get to see your PowerPoint. I know how much effort
Well,
goes into
you're
making
gonna see
those.
it. He's gonna email it to you.
Yeah, you'll be able to review it, and
Yeah.
you can say it out loud and probably do better than I did it.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is Disaster and Communications Preparedness Project Update. I don't have anything specific. Normally, with that particular one, I would have presentations lined up. This is the first time we've been able to use the Zoom thing, and now that I can see it actually works, I can start pulling that together, because there's some very exciting things that people don't even think about that can be helpful to us. So stay tuned on this one.
Yeah, in that area, on communication, I was looking into what are called mobile repeaters for emergency vehicles. One of the problems a lot of the fire police have is their handhelds. They get away from their vehicle and they can't get to a repeater. They've lost touch with dispatch. the mobile repeaters are a very powerful transmitter you put inside an engine or a police car. The handheld communicates with that repeater. It's got a bigger antenna, a lot more power. It can generally bust through and get to a local repeater. So the people can, the emergency personnel actually can continue communication if they're in a house, in a building, or something like that. It's a very interesting technology. I don't know if the Sheriff's Department has these type of mobile repeaters or not, but it's a technology that's pretty interesting. There's a company, I guess, up in LA called Pyramid has sold 70,000 of them, and it integrates the VHF, the UHF, 700, 800 megahertz, all from the handheld that the person has out in the field. It's really kind of an exciting technology that they have.
My understanding, I've talked to the people at the Sheriff's Communications, is that they have a pretty extensive system going, and their handhelds and their mobiles can pretty well break through anything. If something goes down, they have mobile repeaters where they can bring it out to us.
In an emergency.
Yeah, when the thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the 800 megahertz system works very well. There are still areas in the county that we lose reception. In the area that I came from, Southeast Unincorporated, some of that Holy Jim Canyon area up there. You're losing service every time out there.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, radio comms is pretty good. You head south on the 5 and you get through Pendleton and you get into that Claymores area where we lose our reception. But I think that's more of a distance and geography problem.